Good morning. My name is Jason, and if this is the first time you're tuning in to Ski, Fish, and Enjoy Life, thank you. I am very happy and very excited to say that the spring bass season is here. I'll be making my first attempt tomorrow morning, and what I decided to do is go over the do's and do nots if you want to have a successful early season bass season in the Raritan Bay. The first thing, the Raritan Bay, I do all my fishing from the shoreline in the Raritan Bay. So it is 100% based on the tides. You want to go before and after the high tide. For example, high tide tomorrow is 10:33 a.m. So I'll be arriving about 7:30 or so, which is 3 hours before that high tide. And we'll be fishing till about 12 or 1 o'clock, so we get both sides of the tide. Secondly, what type of rig do you use? Okay. The bait of choice for fishing the early season from the shoreline are the jumbo bloodworms. Secondary bait is sandworms. I choose to use a 6-0 circle hook. It's a little bigger than most people will use, but I like to get a nice big glob of worm on there. 60-pound mono leader we have here. We do a 4-ounce weight, and it's on something called a fish finder rig. The Raritan Bay Shoreline has a ton of spots. So if you say, oh, what spot do you go to? What's the hot spot? The answer is there are a ton of them. Places include South Amboy, Lawrence Harbor, Cliffwood Beach, Union Beach, Keensburg, and Port Monmouth, just to name a few. You could go to any one of those spots if you go during the proper tide cycle, which is preferably 2 hours before and 2 hours after the high tide, and you could definitely expect to see fish. The second part, when it comes to bait. Now, before I say this, I'll give it a little preference by saying I'm not here to show you guys how to save money when it comes to fishing. I'm here to show you guys how to catch fish. As I said, the bait of choice are jumbo bloodworms, and they run about $25 for the dozen. A secondary bait are the sandworms, and they run about $15 a dozen. And if you do want to catch fish, it's not you put a half a worm on the hook. I put a nice big glob of bait, sometimes 2 or 3 worms. If it's the jumbo bloods, sometimes 1 is enough. I almost have like an octopus hanging, from the hook, and that will definitely get you the fish. Now, this is not a very cost-effective way to fishing, but it is ridiculously expensive. If you do want to support the channel, outside of fishing, I work as a licensed mortgage originator in the state of New Jersey. So hey, if you guys have any questions on buying, selling, the spring housing market, any of that stuff, my information is in the description of the channel. Please do drop me your information and I'll be happy to reach out to you. But hey, let's get back to fishing. So now, I choose to use a 4-ounce pyramid sinker on here. I use my 2 heavy plugging rods to fish in the Raritan Bay. I have 30-pound braid on here. As I said, we have the 4-ounce weight, and what you want to do, now my answer is going to change a little when we start fishing the surf, but what you want to do is you want to fire your worm ball out as far as you could possibly cast. It is a mud flat that very gradually gets deeper. It's also can stay at standard depth. So for this type of fishing, you want to use the type of pole and the type of setup where you could really fire that out and cast it as far as you can. All right, now let's take a look at all the gear that I bring when I do these early spring fishing trips. We got 2 pole holders, this blue pole here is actually my main plugging rod. I use that actually as one of my light surf poles for the early spring fishing, as I did with the pole that I showed you. I bring extra hooks and rigs. I have a fish dehooker, 60-pound mono leader, tape measure, scissors. This is the most important thing. You must bring a whistle with you, so when you hook up, and especially when your buddies are there, you blow the whistle as obnoxiously as you can, just to show that you're winning when it comes to the fishing. I always bring a chair when I do this type of fishing so I can sit down, and the waders are completely essential because you do not want wet feet in the early spring. With the worms that I mentioned, any bait that you use, whether it's bloodworms, later in the season, fresh bunker and fresh clam, you do want to keep it in a cooler and you do want to keep it cool, not baking in the sun. Like when I use the worms, for example, I'll put a little bit of ice in the bottom of the cooler. I will throw a rag on top of the ice and I'll put the worms on top of the rag so they stay cool, but the cold does not kill them. And of course, you can't have a good fishing trip without your Ford F-150. From now till I'd say about Christmas, this is actually my mobile tackle shop. If you look in the back seat, yes, all that gear stays here from now till pretty much Christmas. I have every possible thing you could possibly need back there to get everything from striped bass to sharks to mermaids to everything else in the middle. So we are definitely going to be prepared throughout the season. I said this before, I'll say it again. For this type of fishing, there are other ways to do it, but in my opinion, this is the single most effective way to do it. You have to use good amounts of bloodworms and sandworms, which is not cheap. I've seen people who have tried to save money on their fishing approach. They have either used the frozen radioactive clam sitting in a little container or frozen bunker. And me personally, I've caught fish after fish after fish right next to the people using the far cheaper baits, and they haven't caught much of anything. Another thing which I'll repeat, the Raritan Bay Shoreline is ridiculously tidal. It is a mud flat. So for example, high tide is 10:30 tomorrow morning. The prime time to fish is between 8:30 a.m. and 12:30 a.m. 12:30 p.m. when the water is at its deepest. So guys, that's about it for now. I will be out there tomorrow. It is definitely going to be one awesome season. I cannot wait. Hope to see you all out there. Let's go.